Hello, and welcome to the Amongst Romans podcast, your window to everything Italy from an outsider's perspective. Join us each week as we navigate the Italian way of life and all the adventures that come along with it. Welcome back to season 3. A lot has happened since we left off at the end of the last season, and we're happy to be back.
We left everyone with a bit of a cliffhanger last season regarding our property purchase.
Yes, so we bought a property in Abruzzo, and at the last episode, we mentioned that we bought the property and we made the offer and it was accepted. So in the meantime, we actually closed the deal and we have the keys to our new property. So I thought this would be a good time to maybe do an episode on buying a property in Italy and what the process entails.
Yeah, I guess we could talk about how foreigners can buy property here in Italy. So it's not something that's not attainable, but there are some kind of strict regulations, I guess, depending on a person purchasing the property.
I think it also depends where you're from, right? So Italy has an exchange agreement with different countries. If an Italian citizen can buy a property in your country, that means you can also buy a property in Italy. Recently, Canada and Australia have changed the laws. So if you are a Canadian citizen or an Australian citizen, you are not able to buy property in Italy. Because I am an EU citizen, we were able to circumvent that and we bought the property because of that. So again, if you are an EU citizen, there are no rules and you are free to buy the property. But if you're coming from, let's say, Canada or Australia, at this time, you're not able to buy it. If you're coming from other countries, again, as long as there is a reciprocal agreement, you're able to buy a property here in Italy.
Yeah, that's probably a disappointing fact for Canadians and Australians. I thought that issue was resolved, but it looks like it's still in play. So keep that in mind if you are planning on purchasing a property here.
I think another common question is really around the property costs, right? It's not so much the actual offer on the property and how much you're offering, how much you actually end up paying, but the actual costs associated with it, which can really add to the price of the home. So I think it's something you should consider.
So aside from the obvious purchase price of the property, you need to keep in mind or put funds aside for notary fees, and that can range between 2 and 4% of the property value. Now, the property value is actually what you paid for the actual property and not the declared value that the cadastro would have for that specific property that you're purchasing. The cadastro, or it's almost similar to MPAC in Canada, where they value the market value of the property, not what you purchased it for. So that's definitely one thing you want to keep in mind when purchasing a property here in Italy. The next thing that you need to keep in mind is the real estate agent fees. They're approximately 3% of the sale price. In our specific scenario, it didn't meet the threshold of that 3%, so there was a flat fee that they put forth for the property purchase. That could also come into play on your final offer on the property that you're purchasing. And then, of course, there's taxes that you need to keep in mind, such as registration tax, land registry tax, cadastral tax. So things like that, you need to also have some funds put aside for your purchase. And then there's the legal fees. So if you hire a lawyer to help you out in the transaction, it's not a requirement, but it is a good idea to actually hire a real estate lawyer that specializes in carrying out all the checks on the property you're purchasing.
And I think it's worth mentioning that that's a big difference between the way we buy property in Canada versus the way we buy property in Italy. So in Canada, you have your real estate lawyer who handles the transaction. The lawyer is the person that deals with, making sure there's no liens on the property, there's nothing owing, that you own, that the person who's selling the property actually has the rights to the title. Here in Italy, the lawyer, I should say, there isn't a real estate lawyer who does that, but that's not a necessary part of the sale. So the notary is the person who actually does the sale for you, but they're not always required to do all the extra heavy work. So do you need to hire a lawyer? You don't have to, but I think I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're looking at buying a rural property. We bought an apartment, so it's a bit different. I think it's a bit more secure or safe, that knowing that there isn't really too much that can go wrong with it, but you never know. If you're buying a property, you might have, let's say, buildings that might not have been built up to code or just built illegally. So again, you're looking at potentially really expensive issues to deal with if you don't have this done. I think for us, this was a step that we felt was important. The lawyer we worked with, he takes a percentage of the sale. So you have to factor in that cost as well. But I think I definitely recommend that if you're buying a property in Italy to hire a lawyer to do that stuff for you and don't just rely on the notaio.
So the next thing that you would need to keep in mind is, taxes on the property purchase. So in Italy, property owners are subject to various taxes. The first one is the IMU. It's short for Imposta Municipale Unica, and it's a property tax for second homes or luxury properties. In our case, it's our first home purchase. It wasn't a luxury property, obviously. And then the next item on the list would be the TARI, the waste collection tax. So every home has to pay this tax for waste collection, such as recycling, regular garbage, stuff like that. And finally, the last item on the tax list is the tassi, a tax that covers local services like road maintenance and such. These can vary depending on the location and the type of property you're purchasing. So it's essential to get advice on your specific situation or purchase.
I think another question that often pops up when people talk about property and buying property in Italy is, can I get a mortgage in Italy as a foreigner? I think that's a very good question. And it's one that I guess, again, will depend on your situation. So yes, the short answer is you can get a mortgage in Italy. You might find that the rate you're given might be a lot higher if you are a foreigner than if you were like a local person living here. You also might not get as much of a loan as you need. So sometimes the banks tend to offer mortgage covering up to 60 to 70% of the property value. So that means you have to cover the remaining 30, 40%. So again, it's also something worth keeping in mind. A friend of ours was telling us how he was trying to sell his property, and it took a very long time for the person who was trying to buy his property to get the mortgage approval. So again, it's something that could be an additional step that would extend the whole process more than you might want.
Okay. So let's talk about the process of buying a property here.
Yeah, I think it was easier in a way than I thought it would be. There's a lot of information online that is very confusing and makes it seem like it's a very complicated process. Again, I think it will depend on where you are buying the property and what kind of property you're buying. So with us, it was fairly easy. We found a place we want to look at the houses. I reached out to the local agency and I said, hi, we want to come and see these properties, which they showed to us. We saw, I think, like 5 or 6, 7 different properties. And then they were in touch with us. We ended up making an offer through them. So once the offer was made, I think usually you have to make a deposit. In our case, we were able to make an offer. And once they accepted, then we were able to send the deposit. And we sent it directly to the seller, which seemed a bit strange, but that's how it worked. Again, we were not dealing with a mortgage. We were just dealing with using our savings to pay for the property. We didn't have to rely on a mortgage, and that was a bit easier.
So the final payment was made through the bank using a certified check. In our situation, there was 3 sellers involved. So we need to make 3 different types of drafts for each of the sellers. And it's called the consegno circolare. So it's essentially a draft that you'll be funding the purchase with.
Right. And that was a bit strange because usually in Canada, we would not really handle the money, right? It would be handled by the lawyer. And in this case, we were told to bring those 3 certified checks with us to the closing. And yeah, that was sort of a strange process. And we weren't sure if we should make the check to the sellers or if we should give the money to the notary to keep an escrow for them paying it. Now, there's additional cost to that. So the notario might charge you for that. So after looking into it, and we even asked our lawyer, and they said it was fine. Like, that's how it usually is done here. Giving them like cash, you're giving them a check, and you're not just giving it to them, you're giving them at the signing, which we didn't know at the time that they were going to be there. So essentially, we ended up getting checks for them, and that's how we showed up at the closing.
So the day of the closing, we needed to go to the notario's office. So this is where it was a little odd for us. We weren't used to actually meeting the sellers, like in any of the sales we've done back in Canada. But in this instance, or in general here in Italy, when you go to the notario, you actually meet with the sellers. And what happens is they go through the document, they read out the full document essentially, and go through the whole process. Everybody signs off these specific legal documents. And they also actually go over the actual, it would be like almost a blueprint of the property you're purchasing. And, everyone signs off on it, making sure that, what you're getting is actually what you're paying for.
Yeah, that was such a strange process because it was almost like you imagine like in the olden days when they had the town crier show up and be like, "Heary, heary, everyone." And it was kind of a similar process with that. So we're all sitting around the desk and the notary started reading this document. He reads it out loud. So he says, this person named, born here, and this is like almost the equivalent of a social insurance number. So he goes through each person. So there was, again, 3 sellers. So we had to wait till he named every single person, where they were born, their social insurance number, where they live, and then me as the buyer, plus, the property. We had to go over again, the property, like the address, this and that. It seemed very strange because it was like, why are you telling us like their social insurance number type of thing? It was very bizarre. I'm not sure if that's done everywhere like this, but that's how it was for us. The people seemed pretty nice, although it was a bit strange, like you said, meeting them because we've never met any of the sellers before. And you don't really see them, right? Like you just go to your lawyer, you sign a paper, you get the key. That's about it. In this case, we ended up talking with them a little bit. And again, this was their parents owned the property. So they got a little misty-eyed when he was going over all the information, the details. They were a bit nostalgic about it, which was kind of nice. And they seemed nice. And, they give us all the keys, which was like a stack of keys now. And the apartment comes with these beautiful wooden doors and sort of like a hallway. And, they were saying to us, like, oh, what made you decide to buy a property here? And the gentleman that was sitting beside me, he mentioned, all those wooden parts are like handmade. And I told him like, yeah, we really like those. And I think he felt, you could see that he was almost happy with this because I guess, if their parents lived there for so long, it's a very sentimental property. It kind of makes you feel bad that someone's going to come and knock it all down. Like someone could, I guess, but we didn't. So it's just really bizarre because we're not used to that. And yeah, they were very nice. The whole process of the reading thing didn't take too long. But before we even signed with them, it was also another kind of strange point. So again, I was buying the property under my name because I'm an EU citizen. But because I don't speak Italian well enough to understand the process, I had to assign you as my representative. So it was like, you had to sign paperwork on my behalf as well, which was really bizarre considering like I'm right there and you can just translate it for me. But we had to have you designated, which was kind of strange, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was actually really, really odd. Another oddity was having to sign my full name, which I've never done before. So I use my short name for forever. And they wanted us to sign in our full given names, which was pretty odd. So
yeah, I forgot about that. So yeah, and like you have a signature, everybody has a signature. So that's how I signed it. He's like, no, you have to spell it out. So I sort of printed my name. He's like, no, you have to write it in cursive. And I thought, that is so strange because I've never written out my full name in cursive. Like, well, maybe not never, but like it's been a very long time. Whereas in Canada, like your signature is your signature. So that was a very strange process as well. But, everything ended up being fine. The notary, they were pretty nice. It was pretty quick process. We paid them via transfer, so that was fine too. We paid the commission on the transfer as well. And yeah, it was fairly simple in the end.
I guess we should talk about our experience dealing with the real estate agent and the company itself. We ended up using a fairly large Italian real estate agency called Tecnocasa, and the agent was actually very nice, super helpful. There were a couple times that we were a little bit confused on some of the things that he wanted to have us done during the purchase. But otherwise, we spoke English, and I think he helped us out quite a bit, even with things like transferring over the water, the electricity, stuff like that. So I think he was pretty helpful.
Yeah, that's what surprised me the most because we didn't expect them to speak English. Because when I messaged them, we used the website Idealista, which is a very common one here in Italy. We found a bunch of properties we liked, and I reached out to them. First, it was via the website, and I said, we're coming, and I translated my conversation with them. So I had no idea they would speak English. Anyway, they responded. They said, yeah, sure, come this time. So we got there. And once we got there, we realized that they did speaking, maybe not all of the people in there, but to some level they did. The agent we were working with, he was super nice. And like you said, he was very helpful. We stayed in touch with him. I didn't feel like I was getting pressured to buy the property, which sometimes you get with him. We didn't get pressured. He was very nice, very accommodating with even dealing with negotiations. He helped us out. Like he wasn't pressuring us, and he was timely with getting back to us, which sometimes you can encounter a problem, like people don't get back to you here in Italy, which is really frustrating. So I think with him, we got his WhatsApp and he would message us. We would message him if we needed to. And even after the sale, if we had any questions, we can always contact him. So don't be hesitant to reach out to different agencies. Again, we used Tecnocasa, which is a very big real estate agency in Italy. So, I don't know if they're more likely to be not necessarily nicer, but at least they're a big company, right? So they are legit. It's not like some place you've never heard of. And I think that for us was a bit easier. And I think we felt more confident dealing with them.
Yeah, I think mainly due to the fact that they probably deal with a lot of expats and foreigners, and commonly almost everyone speaks English. So I guess it's kind of a requirement, especially if you're dealing with real estate agencies based in the larger cities. It might be a little different in smaller towns. It may be difficult to find an English-speaking real estate agent, but I would assume that's probably pretty common for larger cities.
I think we should also mention that the lawyer we hired to do the due diligence, he also spoke English. So we found him on one of the Facebook groups for expats, and he was very good. So again, he spoke English as well. So we were able to communicate with him. And if needed to, you can speak to him in Italian, and it was fine. So that was a surprising thing for us. But at the same time, we didn't expect it. So that was very, very helpful. But I think we should talk about what happens next. Like I mentioned, the property is from the 60s, so it does need to be updated. The main places that we need to renovate are the bathroom and the kitchen. And like I said, the property is in Abruzzo, in a town called Chieti. So right now, it's about a 3-hour drive from us. The challenge is, how are you going to work on the property? How are you going to get anybody to work for you? A lot of people on Facebook groups especially, they struggle with trying to find someone, whether it's an electrician, a plumber, or a tiler to come and do work on their house. We ended up finding from a friend of ours that there is a person you can hire here in Italy to help you with that. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So things are a bit, obviously, like everything, is a bit different here when it comes to renovating properties. So you can go about it on your own, obviously. You will encounter quite a bit of issues, such as finding people to actually carry out the work, finding the items that you want to replace, kitchens, tiles, stuff like that, right? There is a lot of work involved in finding all that on your own. And so we actually found that through a contact who actually is based in Pescara, which is close by, city that's really close to Chieti, that he was actually carrying out a renovation. So luckily, we were able to get his contacts and trusted contacts that he's dealt with before. And we found that there is actually someone that can overlook the work that's being carried out. So he's referred to as the direttore, or if you translate it, director in English. And what they do is they price out quotes from different companies that can do the work for you. So they'll price out the quotes, get quotes for you, deal with all the permits and stuff like that if you're making changes to the property that require permits from the comune, which is the city hall. And we got him to come in. We told him what we wanted to have done. And he came back pretty quickly with what it would cost for him to overlook the project. And so right now we're at the beginning stages of this renovation, and he's going to overlook the whole project. It's actually a bonus because of the fact that we're so far away. It's a good 3.5 hour drive for us. So to have someone to keep an eye on the workers, make sure the work gets done the way we want it, I think that's a huge benefit.
I think at first I almost felt like this was one of those let's trick the foreigners into this thing. But in a way, it makes sense. So, like you said, he can do all that. But also another point is sometimes when you hire people, you want to make sure that they have insurance, right? So if somebody falls in your house or gets hurt, they can turn around and say, I'm going to sue you now. Instead of us worrying about that, this is that director's problem. You hire him to manage the work for you. So it's up to him to find contractors that have insurance, that can give you quotes. He's going to be there to let them in, make sure that they bring the materials, do everything that you want them to. But also he's Italian. So I think maybe for him getting quotes will be a bit easier because sometimes, as a foreigner in places like Italy, when you go to get quotes, you always feel like you're going to get ripped off because they're like, oh, okay, you're a foreigner. So it's going to be like double the price. Whereas with him, again, he's an Italian person. I mean, nothing stopping him from going and saying, hey, give me the quote and add on top of it. But, he came recommended through a friend of ours. So we do have a certain level of trust in him. We'll see how it goes. But it's not something that I've seen across in any of the Facebook groups or expat groups or even articles that I was searching for about buying a property in Italy. So this was something that we learned. So again, if you're looking at buying a property in Italy and you have renovations, consider looking into getting a director. I guess it's almost like a project manager to overlook your renovation, and that might make the process a lot easier.
So the question is, can you buy a property and renovate? Of course, the answer is yes, but there are caveats to that question. Many buyers are attracted to the Italian lifestyle, the beautiful homes that are available for sale, and most are very affordable, especially if they require some work, right? Italy offers those €1 homes in many of the smaller villages to attract people to invest in smaller communities. These properties do require quite a bit of work, extensive renovations, and obviously there's legal obligations required for these €1 homes because you need to complete the work within a certain time frame, and it's usually, I think it's like around 3 years or so. But the problem with that obviously is finding the workers to carry it out. And in smaller towns, smaller villages, it's going to be very difficult to find contractors that are trusted or even available. So that's definitely something you want to consider when you're looking to purchase a home here.
I think another question other people ask about buying a home is whether they can buy a property and rent it out. So again, Italy is a popular destination. If you're thinking of buying a home and then renting it out as like an Airbnb or even for long-term rental, the answer is yes, you can do that. If you're looking at renting your property, there are certain regulations that you have to follow. So they're cracking down on different things. So if you're starting a new rental property, like if you've been in existence for, let's say, 10 years, it's a bit different. But if you're starting a new home and you want to rent it, there are certain agreements and you have to pay income tax on that. So again, strict rental laws, which you have to apply for a license. So if you're thinking of buying a property and renting it out, make sure that you do get some, I would say like a legal advice from somebody who not only specializes in this type of thing, but can also make sure that they can assist you with this. The process itself, we have not gone through because we're not looking to buy a property to rent out, but just dealing with the different regulations here in Italy, it can get complicated. So again, if you're buying in a bigger town like Rome, Naples, Milan, it might be easier to get the answers. If you're buying in a smaller town, if it's a rural property especially, it might be more difficult to get an answer because sometimes it's just that's how it works here, right? Either the place is not open or you go in, you're missing something. They're like, no, you have to come back with this or that, or you don't have the proper thing. And it just makes it very complicated. So I would say whenever you're looking at something like that, try to hire somebody who can help you because it will save you money in the long term.
Yeah, I fully agree because if you don't do your homework, you could end up losing money, obviously. Like Kasia mentioned, there's strict regulations, especially now in the larger cities. I think they're limiting Airbnb rentals. You definitely want to keep that in mind. It may not affect the smaller towns and cities, but if you're looking at Rome, Florence, Milan even, they are cracking down on the number of Airbnbs that are made available.
I think the biggest takeaway from this whole process was that the buying property itself wasn't as difficult as online forums and other articles have led us to believe. Number two was that I was surprised that finding people who spoke English, especially where we were buying, was not as difficult. You don't always need to have somebody who speaks English. A real estate agent, we had a guy come in to do a kitchen quote. He also spoke English. Sometimes it makes it easier for me, at least. Like you can communicate with them, but I showed them the pictures. I had ideas on Pinterest, so it was a bit easier for him to understand like what I was looking for without having to translate everything. And also, buying a property is not that difficult. What makes it difficult sometimes is where you buy. Glad that we ended up buying an apartment in a bigger city, not a small house in a small town, because that might be a totally different process. But I can tell you it wasn't as difficult. I didn't know what the process was going to be like. It was giving me more of an anxiety. So I was making a bigger deal out of it than actually was because it was the unknown, right? I don't know how you felt about it.
There's also always some hesitation when you're looking to make a large purchase. I wasn't sure of the legal aspects. I know it helped quite a bit when we ended up finding someone who specializes in real estate purchases. So I think that was worth every penny to have a lawyer overlook the full process, reviewing documentation, reviewing all the legal documents. So I think that was worth every penny.
So I think at this point, we have bought the property, we got the keys, we got our director to oversee the project, and we got a kitchen guy to come and take a look. So now our next steps are to hook up the water and hook up the electricity, which is something we're still trying to figure out how to do. I think it's just some forms we have to submit. Hopefully the process of the renovation won't take too long. I estimate probably up to 6 months, hopefully not, but about 6 months. So we'll keep you posted on what's happening and any issues that come along. But for now, this is where it's at. So if you're looking at buying a property in Italy, it's not as difficult as it might seem. Go for it. If you're thinking about it and you were not sure, this is your opportunity. And if you have any questions about the process, feel free to reach out to us on social media. We are on Instagram and TikTok, or you can always send us a message to our website. And this brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and review on whatever you're listening right now. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned.